Okay, if we can come to order, please. This is the City of Pullman Planning Commission regular meeting on the 25th of February, 2026. We begin by calling the roll. John Anderson is here. Brent Carper. Here. Scott Hodge.
Here.
Jeff Joswick Jones.
Here.
Joe O'Callahan.
Here.
Marina English. Here. Angela Taylor is excused. Yes. The first item for business is the minutes of the special meeting of February 19, 2025. Do we have any comments, corrections, deletions, motions?
I move to accept the minutes.
Okay, we have a motion from Jeff and a second from Lorena to accept the minutes as prepared by staff. I want to pause for just a moment. This meeting was 6 days ago, and we've had the minutes for at least a couple of days.
I was going to comment, the minutes came out less than 24 hours after a really long meeting. It was pretty unbelievable.
A 4-hour meeting, and you guys got them to us.
Yep, very good.
I would ask you to more than take a bow. I really think this was quite a good job. And in particular, I thought the minutes really summarized effectively everything that everybody said. This was just really, really superb work on the part of the staff. So thank you. Anybody else?
Totally agree.
I would second that. You need a second. Great job.
I detect consensus. Okay, we're ready to vote, though. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, minutes. Next item, regular business, conduct a public meeting on Pullman City Code, Chapter 17.109, short-term rentals. Does the staff have any comments this evening?
So this is the continuation from last Thursday. There was quite a bit in the agenda that's been added kind of throughout as we've gotten more comments. But otherwise, this is just a continuation to see how what we talked about last week has been incorporated, more changes the commission would like to see, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, I note that we have before us a dwelling inspection request form.
That goes with option B from Commissioner Hodge.
Okay. And is that the same thing, dwelling inspection checklist? That's the same thing?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, we will begin then by asking if anybody in the audience has any comment. You will have to sign a sign-up sheet at the podium, and please limit your comments to 5 minutes. Also, that's quite a long time. Also, if you have sent us a letter or any other communication, we have received it and we have all read it. So, does anybody in the audience have any comments to make to us?
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on short-term rental regulations in the City of Pullman. The STR market in Pullman has changed significantly in recent years. Major WSU-related weekends now generate less demand due to factors such as conference realignment, consolidation of family weekends, and declining university enrollment. These changes have reduced visitor numbers and created economic challenges for short-term rental owners and other small businesses throughout the city. Under these conditions, the current regulatory requirements and associated fees place an added burden on short-term rental operators. Pullman has developed a reputation as a challenging environment for small businesses, and this regulatory update presents an opportunity to improve that perception. Streamlining the registration process, reducing or eliminating fees, and fostering a more cooperative relationship with short-term rental owners would support local businesses while potentially increasing city revenue during a period of budgetary strain. After reviewing the materials presented by Commissioner Hodge, I don't know if the audience has read them, but they are in the documents for tonight's meeting, I believe option B best represents the city's regulatory objectives with the needs of short-term rental owners. Thank you for your time and consideration. And I will,
Okay, anybody have any questions, or, Joe?
What made you choose option B? Can you go into that a little bit?
yeah, so for me, the fees are kind of a principle of the thing. You know, we've been contributing lodging tax to the city for quite a number of years. And, you know, most of these conditions are common sense, things that most short-term rental owners are already doing. Smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors, lights if it's too dark at night, you know, those kinds of things are pretty common in short-term rentals. So it just seems like adding some of these other things, especially fees, it kind of grates, you know, after we've done so much work to create an environment that people want to come and stay in Pullman. So kind of, paying any fee at all just feels very cumbersome. So option B eliminates the fee. It also kind of levels the playing field for everybody who's operating any kind of rental in the city of Pullman, whether it be in their home or a standalone. Any other questions? Thank you.
Anybody else? We're about to close the public comment period. Okay, we are closing the public comment period. Carolyn mentioned Scott's option A and B. We'll start with Scott. I will say, as I came over here, you know, after reading everything and watching Wheel of Fortune, it seems to me that we've heard all the arguments, and I don't mean to say that that's been contentious. I've seen contentious hearings, and we haven't been contentious, but what I'm saying is laying out the option and then presenting the arguments is redundant because we've heard it all. So keep it brief. I mean, I understand you've laid out two options. I understand that, and I'd like to hear what you have to say about the two options.
Sure. All right, thanks, John. My intent in the beginning was to hopefully help REO when we said at the last meeting that we would succinctly show what is required by the state and what is additionally required by the city of Pullman, so that we don't spend a lot of time talking about what's required by the state. This commission can't do anything about that. Even though some of it is a little onerous and maybe I'd like to change it, I can't. So let's not talk there. What we can do is talk about the things that the city is requiring in addition to the state. So that was my intent with option A, is to really simplify the presentation so that we could focus on, because I myself got a little bit caught up in perhaps not wanting some things that really the city can't do anything about it, right? They're just echoing what is already a state law. All right, so I got done with option A, but I've been thinking about this for a long time, and option B is this approach that, and you guys have all heard me say this, right? I think you shouldn't single out a class within a business. And so there are three types of rentals: short-term, medium-term, and long-term. And as much as we can, I want those to all be treated the same. So if somebody comes to stay for 30 days while they're a coach looking for a house, a medical professional at Pullman Regional, if they're a construction worker, if they stay 30 days, they don't have to do any of this. If they stay 29 days, then they have to do all of what's required for a short-term rental. And so that doesn't set well with me that that's the case, right? So I looked at option B as an approach to saying, can we level the playing field where we come up with reasonable expectations for what those that provide rental houses in the community would abide by? Now, we're not taking on medium-term and long-term, but I think in the future, this commission could, and so the idea with writing option B was to say, can we set the groundwork, the framework, for what would be reasonable to apply to short-term rentals, but later look at applying it beyond short-term rentals. And to do that, it's got to be pretty reasonable. And so that was the intent with option B, was to, again, very clearly say, these are state requirements. I can't do anything about them, but here's some very reasonable City of Pullman short-term rental requirements that we could later look at applying to a larger set of rentals. And just quickly, John, to go through, there's really only 3-ish, maybe 4 things that you can say that the city is, if you look at option A and option B, most of what is in there is state requirements, which, by the way, is also applied to all of the rentals, short-term rentals in Washington state that are outside of the city limits. So that would be those that are renting in the county, right? They're all required to do what's on that state thing. I think for a long time they haven't been doing it. And they saw that as a bit onerous that the city of Pullman was requiring them to do that, or they were chiding that those that were in the city of Pullman had to do it, where if you were in the county, you didn't have to do it. But that's not true, right? If you're in the county, you're still required to do all of those state requirements. And so there's really only those 4 things in there. Maybe the thing that is the different, I don't think anybody would say that needing to put smoke detectors in the house and a fire extinguisher is a terrible burden, right? And I would suspect most short-term rental operators already have that, mainly because the platform requires it. And if you didn't have it, you probably would get a review indicating that you should have, and you'd get knocked down in your review. And that's really dangerous because nobody would rent from you. The flashlight or the night light or the power out light, that's a little different. It doesn't seem terrible to have to do that, right? It's not a terrible financial burden. It seems reasonable that you would like the way out. I recently heard from someone who runs a short-term rental that they used to provide those. And then after they got taken by the guests a number of times and they had to replace them, about the 3rd time it got taken, they just decided to not replace it anymore, right? So I never thought about that, right? That the guests would steal the little night light that the city of Pullman required them to put in. So I rethought the little night light a little bit, right? Like, gosh, that's bad. Yeah. And in option B, it seems to provide an extra measure of safety that we, the commission, didn't talk about, and that's the registration, right? Long-term rentals in Pullman are required to register, and the perception is that they're registering for a safety and identification method. So emergency personnel, that includes sheriff's department, state police, city police, fire, have access to this database that would tell you that this is a rental and you have access or can call the person who's in charge of the rental. It's a $15, recently changed to one-time fee. Used to be that you had to annually renew it. Now you don't. And so on option B, if a long-term rental is required to do it and I want to apply rules universally, yeah, that's why I picked up applying it to short-term rentals. Yeah, I think.
Okay, anybody else? I do note your option B applies to short-term rentals with 1 or 2 bedrooms. Is that right?
So option B would apply to every short-term rental in Pullman.
Okay, okay.
Right? Option A would be going back to those we say long-term resident occupied, and we gave there's a definition there, but yeah. So if you have a long-term resident living on site and you're renting out 2 or less bedrooms, in option A, that would not be considered a short-term rental. You would not have to follow any of the city guidance. You still would have to follow the state, but not the city.
I believe that the state exempts 1 or 2 bedrooms with, the state exempts
Yep.
1 or 2 bedrooms
Yep.
owner occupied.
So you would go to
wouldn't
the
have
state,
follow
and then
the
you'd be
state.
exempted there also, as long as
Yeah,
that continues to be the
okay,
case.
okay. So, does anybody have any comments basically about option A and option B? And bearing in mind that we have a draft from staff based on what we said on last Thursday.
I have a question, actually. Just to talk a little bit about the safety compliance and how that would be done. For example, I see the dwelling request form. Is this something that would be given to all people who are renting? How would that safety process be?
Are you referring directly to option B?
Yeah,
So
option
if we
B,
did
yeah.
option B. Well, that's certainly open for discussion about how exactly we would implement it. Yeah, I think it's open for discussion about how we would implement it.
Scott, could I, and I'm going to ask RL's help too. These are existing forms that the city's had for a long time, Lorena. These are not specific, and they're not currently being used for short-term rentals. This is something the city already uses as part of the free life safety inspections that the city will do if somebody requests it. So, yeah, exactly. So Scott's talked about, I think, he had a renter in one of his long-term rentals who requested this, and somebody from the city, the fire marshal or a building inspector, came out and did that years ago. They used this. So this is just an example. I think what RL's providing is an example of what the city already does today, and yeah.
It's a nice service. I don't know how many in the city take advantage of it. Ariel, any idea?
I could find that number, but I don't know off the top of my
Yeah,
head.
all right. Well, you'll find one.
You can see that.
I honestly can't say if I know if I've never heard anybody else tell me that they've had this done, so we might be standing at a grand total of 1. I doubt it, but
No, we get a handful a year that I can think of, but I just don't know exactly what that number is.
yeah. Here's a guess, Lorena. I'm just thinking, so I serve on the Whitman County Landlord Association, been on that board for a long time, was the treasurer for 2 years, very involved in that organization. And so I have a pretty good feel for long-term rentals in town, and the number, and I'm going to guess that for every 100 long-term rentals in town, there is 1 short-term rental, rough numbers, right? So when I think about having this applied to short-term rentals, the opportunity is that 100 long-term rentals in town could call and ask for this service to be done, right? Come out and do a safety and healthy home inspection. That's what's called on the website. By adding the short-term rentals to this, we're adding about 1% additional homes that could call and ask for this to be done. And if option B was chosen, we're really not saying you have an option anymore. You really have to have this done, right? But it's equivalent to about 1% of what I estimate the long-term rentals to be.
I think it's a great idea. I think that kind of talking about how safety compliance would be required is something that we need to do, but there's a lot in option B that I like. I think partially because it sort of stops the arguments.
Okay, anybody else?
I think I'm going to do a Anna opine here, and opine a little bit. And I haven't talked about, I have a short-term rental. Actually, I don't. My wife does. I haven't talked about this at all. And there's numerous reasons for that. But I think it's actually, when I look at it, it's a good case study as to how these might be applied and what happens when we try to apply these rules to an old house. My house was built in 1892. Our Airbnb is actually a little house that's in the back that the history of the house says that used to be a chicken coop. And so the short-term rental is actually called Carolyn's Cozy Coop. And she spent about a year putting this together so that it would have the right aesthetics, and so everybody would look at this and want to stay there, right? And she knew how important it was to get 5-star ratings, all those things. So she spent a long time, and she talked to lots and lots of people about how to do this. And we got some bad advice, and the bad advice that we got was basically, even talking to our accountant, everybody said, the policy in Pullman is don't ask, don't tell. Basically, don't tell anybody you have a short-term rental and everything's okay, and the city doesn't care. And they're gonna get taxes. And I say that was a bad decision for us because our house is zoned R2, and we could have gotten a conditional use permit. And if we would have known that, if we would have talked to the city, we would have actually done that. And so, and in that case, it would have been our best interest to not have any of these changes, right? And a number of people have talked here who have had conditional use permits for the STRs, and they've amazingly, they're here talking about why we should encourage short-term rentals, even though they have an advantage, right? They have a conditional use permit. They have the ability to have an STR. It's in their vested interest to not have us do any of these things. And that's essentially where we sit. But from what I understand and the way that we're treated, when we go to other Airbnbs, it's a community. It's like the people who run microbreweries, right? They all promote each other's beers. And it's the same thing with Airbnbs. And everybody has a different theme, right? So ours is a cozy coop. Some people have huge houses, right? Ours is small. It's 900 square feet, small house, okay. And so one of the things that we don't seem to address, we act like this is only something that happens for football weekends. Okay, our house, we're pet friendly. We'll let people bring as many dogs as they want. I mean, we have no limits. Pet friendly, we have a fenced yard. And so I went back and looked, and about 15% of our rentals are people are here to have their dogs looked at by the vet school. Another 10, maybe if you just count the days, 20% are people that have moved to town and they're building a house, and they actually rent the house for longer. It's sometimes, like last time, it was 3 months. We have somebody that came in January 1st that's running it for another 3 months. They're a physician. They're going to work at Pullman Regional Hospital, and they need someplace to stay while they get housing. And so it's not just football weekends. But I mean, the fact that we take pets means that we're special in that sense, right? We get a different clientele than other people. So it is, again, it's not just football weekends. And so when we look at the house and we look at the safety features, okay, so we have a fire extinguisher, obviously. The regulations as they're written, have caused my wife extreme duress because it says it has to be mounted on the wall, right? I mean, she spent a year in this house, and so now she's like, where can I mount it on the wall that it doesn't ruin this aesthetic of this like country home, you're in a chicken coop kind of thing, right? I mean, there's chickens everywhere, all those kind of things. And so that might seem like a minor thing, but aesthetics in Airbnbs are actually really important things. People need to appreciate the area that they're living in. And so that's just a really minor thing, but it turns into something that's a little bit different. But we do have a fire extinguisher. In the manual, though, we don't recommend that people use a fire extinguisher. We recommend that if you have a fire, you dial 911 and you leave the house. We're not really interested in people becoming firefighters in our short-term rentals. Okay, and so we had smoke detectors, and they weren't interconnected. And so to meet these rules, we actually did this because we want to meet short-term rental rules, and we'll go back to short-term rentals eventually. But it's a 900 square foot house. And so interconnected smoke detectors are basically useless, right? I mean, you can hear a smoke detector in that house no matter what. So it's just basically giving Amazon $125. Okay, we require carbon monoxide detectors. Well, there's no gas service in the house. There's no carbon monoxide potential in this house. We actually put in heat pumps to make it so that it's cheaper, basically. And here's the interesting one, the exit lighting. If we have to put exit lighting near the door, there's no plug near the door. And so we would have to actually rewire everything. And because we realize that exit lighting is important, what we have actually are motion lights. And so anytime somebody goes up and down the stairs towards the door or in the hallways towards the door, there's battery-operated motion sensor lights that light the way so that it's easier for them to see. But the regulation says we have to plug it into a wall because it has to go turn on when the power's off. And so that's actually can be really expensive. I heard in the Pullman City Council meeting a couple weeks ago that these don't necessarily need to be right next to the door, and so that's easy. Then you can plug it in someplace else, and we can have this other light that actually acts as the real lighting. But again, we're just giving money to Amazon. It's not actually making the house any safer. And then the escape plan. I mean, I know we all, as soon as we get in our hotel rooms, we look at the escape plan. I don't think anybody really does. I'm not convinced that the escape plan, I mean, it's a good idea, honestly, but I don't think that it's a super important thing. And so in terms of applications of these safety features, I mean, I understand it. It's easy to say this isn't a problem, right? You can buy them on Amazon, it's cheap. But in the end, it doesn't actually, our house is no safer by following these regulations as it was before. We just spend money. So basically, I look at that as kind of a case study, and I think there's a lot of people in the same situation. They have small places. They have older places. They don't necessarily have outlets in the correct spot. And I don't know whether we should discourage them from having short-term rentals because of that. I've noticed in the proposal, though, it doesn't actually say interconnected smoke detectors, because that's not required by the state. That's an additional thing.
Yeah, I took that out.
Anyway, I've opined a little bit.
Anybody else?
So I took that out, basically, because RJ gave an example of it.
Took one out.
I took out the interconnection
I
of the
see.
smoke detectors. And that came from the discussion that RJ had where he said, hey, I thought about Turl, right? If you rent a 1950s classic car and expect it to have the safety features of your 2026 automobile, you're going to be disappointed, right? It's not going to be there. And so, but I also would be remiss in renting, say, a 2000 era car. I wouldn't expect it to be the same as 2026, but I also expect it to be equivalent to a 2020 car. So as rules have changed, safety standards have changed, we've learned as a society, we have made decisions about what improves safety. Smoke detectors is a good example. And so while older houses didn't require smoke detectors, those are considered universally safe enough that it doesn't matter when your house was built, even if it was built before those safety standards were in. At some point, if you do much to that house, then you have to include a smoke detector. The interconnection didn't come around until quite recently. And so I think, given RJ's guidance, it's appropriate to apply the safety standard for the era in which the house was built. So in Jeff's case, smoke detectors. But if you live in a 2025 house, building codes say they got to be interconnected. So they would expect to be interconnected. And if we have an inspector go out and look at those and he knows it's a 2025 build, those smoke detectors are going to need to be interconnected. Jeff's, they don't need to be interconnected.
Okay, anybody else?
I have a couple of comments. And I'm losing my voice, so I'll try to keep it brief. I think Jeff and Scott made good points about the exit lighting, the battery-powered lighting. I disagree, Scott, that potential theft is a reason to exclude it from the list. I mean, so are fire extinguishers, so are lots of things. And to Jeff's point, I don't remember where we're at now with how it's written, but, you know, maybe plugged in next to the door needs to be like, plugged in as close to the door as possible, you know, and if that's 20 feet away, so be it. And then I had a question, maybe for staff, maybe if anybody knows, you know, Scott's bringing up these points on safety standards and years of structure built. To your knowledge, is the city of Pullman looking at future residential code, including sprinkler systems? Because the city of Bremerton does now, and I know of at least one community my in-laws just moved to in Utah. Every house includes sprinkler systems. Do you know if Pullman's looking at that?
So that's actually an international residential code standard that Washington State amends out. So that's been, I think Jeremy said the early 2000s is when that got put into the code, and then Washington State's been amending that out. And so that's one of the more, how does Jeremy phrase it? That's one thing that, like, the rest of the, if they don't amend it out, like, other states have to put sprinkler systems in every single residential house, but Washington State takes that out so that you don't have to.
And Pullman's not interested in,
We don't change what
Undoing that.
Washington State has adopted through amendments. So whatever Washington State does is what we adopt as the next residential and commercial codes. So if Washington State continues to amend that out, that's how we'll continue to be. But if Washington State decides to keep that in and not amend it out, then we would then follow suit. Because we just adopt what the state has adopted.
and hypothetically, Pullman could go above and beyond. I'm pretty sure that's
Yes, so
Bremerton
you
is
can be
doing.
more safe
Yeah,
than what the state says. If the state said you're going to do sprinkler systems, we couldn't go, no, thank you.
got it. Okay, thank you.
So Joe, just the way it's written right now, this is the same in, it might even be the same in aerials, but at least in option A and B, it says you have to have at least one automatic turn-on power outage light in a location that assists guests in emergency egress. So it's a little bit open for you to put it in a place somewhat convenient because it has an outlet, but also shines some light to assist them in getting out if they're trying to get out in emergency.
I think the wording's a little bit different in the A and the B, Scott. I mean, it says, the power outage nightlight or flashlight that plugs into an existing outlet in the main room or hallway. So so it spells out that it's an existing outlet, so nobody would ever have to, assuming you have an outlet in the main room or hallway. I guess, maybe a chicken coop might not, but as long as you have one outlet, I think you're okay.
Okay, anybody else?
I guess, Scott, are you in favor of option B?
I would love for you all to make up your minds independently. I tried to be as unbiased when I put these together as possible, and so that's why I decided to write the memo to introduce them. And hopefully you don't see any bias in there, right? It just simply says, here's a couple options. I truly did option A with the hopes that that would help Ariel in having, when she put all of this together. Unfortunately, she's so dang fast that by the time I got mine done, she already had hers posted, so it didn't help her. Bummer, right? But the intent, I think, was exactly what we asked her to do at the special meeting, which was that, can you organize this in such a way that you say, here's the state requirements, here's the city requirements, and then clean up the wording, right? Did you feel like that's what your direction was from the last meeting?
Correct.
Yeah. And then we gave her a couple ideas of what things we wanted removed, right? Like, for example, we said we didn't want the whole section that she cut out that has to do with enforcement. She moved that. Well, you'll see that's not an option A or B either, right? So I took that out, but she'd already done all that. So, But by the time I saw that hers was out there, and I wish I'd have looked, I just didn't anticipate she'd be done so fast that I actually talked to her about this, and she said, well, have you seen my option out there? I said, oh, man, no. But I took A, and then I leveraged off of it to do B. And B, just really the difference in B is that section down there where we heard from so many people about the $200 application fee, so I was looking for a way to, how do we take that out with a focus on safety? Can we do that without losing safety? And this was my attempt at not losing safety. So you still would have an inspection. There is an option to even take that out, right? That we've heard from a number of people, including tonight, that there's really not a lot gained by having this inspection, that the system itself does so well at making sure that houses are safe. That's what Jeff's just said, right? I think he is so typical of a short-term rental operator, right? They're attentive to detail. They know that their livelihood depends on it. Do you need an inspection to make sure you did it right? I don't know. Iffy. But I wasn't sure I could make that big, huge step. So here's a half step. And the half step is you still need a safety inspection, but it's the same inspection that you can call right now and get done on your long-term rental. And then I added the one other thing, and this really just comes down to the rental registration, right? We require people who are landlords or those who have rentals to register with the city of Pullman, and the idea behind that is safety. And I thought, well, why are we excluding short-term rentals from that? So I know I'm adding in something that wasn't in option A, and I hesitated a lot with that. Do we really need STRs to register? It's a different model. But I keep going back to this idea I have that you should come up with a good idea and apply it universally. And so I put it in here, right? It's a good idea, I think, to register. It's $15, and we apply it universally to rentals. And then in Jeff's example, if somebody had to show up and Jeff was gone, they would know how to get a hold of him. Because now, would they not know how to get a hold of him if they got inside the house and they looked at his book or looked at a posting on the wall? No, but what if they can't get into the place? So this just gives them an idea of how they can look up in their database that's in their vehicles. Who's the owner?
Eek. I take back my question about the safety compliance required, because I actually see, like, mentally, I would have put that up in the block before where it's under the fire marshal or building official, because I was kind of separating it out. So I understand what you're saying. I would have just placed that above so it goes with the inspection. So, yeah, so to me, that block would just say no annual permit renewed. So I just want to take back my question, because I see that I have answered in my head, but it was just the organization of it that confused me a little bit.
Okay.
I'm going to respond. First of all, option B, which seems to be the focus here, I do want to emphasize that option B includes somebody who has just one or two bedrooms, one or two rooms, which I think is a good thing. But I want to emphasize that so that people who think it's a bad thing can respond. Option B requires a safety inspection. my question really is, what's the difference between that and requiring a no-cost license? And part of my issue with that, I asked the staff, does the staff issue a certificate to people who have certain types of licenses from the city?
Yes? If, I guess, so like if, when someone submits like an application for a short-term rental, once they go through the whole process, they get an approval certificate. And it has their short-term rental number, the address, the owner's contact, emergency number, non-emergency number for fire, EMS, police, their occupancy, and it's signed by RJ, saying that they have done what they need to do, they're good. And then they get a new one after they do their affidavit for renewal.
My contention is that's a good thing for the short-term rental owner, because first of all, you've satisfied a good part of their requirements. You've satisfied one of the safety requirements, so you have to have emergency number, non-emergency number, and so forth. If that's all printed in the city certificate, then the owner doesn't have to do that. Secondly, for anybody who is renting, For anybody who is renting, it seems to me, if you show up and you have a small binder with the exit plan and so forth, and in there is a certificate that says, from the city of Pullman, that says, this is a licensed short-term rental, that's, it seems to me, a modicum of assurance that this has been approved by some appropriate official. And I'm not sure that there's enough of a difference between, leaving aside the fee issue, I'm not sure there's enough of a difference between just requiring that you register and so forth and have a permit as a short-term rental, between that and the safety inspection. And with regard to the safety inspection, I will respond to something that Jeff said. He got a lot of bad advice. I think having the building official or the fire marshal tour the residents will eliminate a lot of that bad advice. If you get bad advice about some safety issue, about, you have a fire extinguisher, but it's in a cabinet underneath the sink, the fire marshal or the building inspector will find that and will give good advice. And that's one reason why I want to see this inspection, because people will get good advice from a professional person who sees these things all the time and who is in homes, at least as often as people have 1892 houses in Pullman, the building inspector is in those houses. So I'm wondering why, I'm thinking there are advantages to having a registered short-term rental, someone who would get a certificate from the city saying this is a registered short-term rental from the city of Pullman.
So the thought there, John, was to one, eliminate barriers to entry by requiring the $200 inspection. Two, it would unburden the planning department with the administration of this. So there's two things. The third thing is there's already a mechanism in place for anyone. It's intended, I think it was originally intended for those new to living on their own who came to school at WSU to call and say, my parents' house was pretty safe. I don't know if this one is, and I'm new to living on my own. Can somebody who knows more than me come out and make sure this place is safe? But it's not limited to that person. If you, in your house, want this done, you, the owner, can call and say, would you please come out and just examine the safety in my house? You can have it done, right? And that doesn't cost anything. And they would do, I mean, it's generous that it's free, but it has been free, right? That's the standard by which we're living. They would come and do this for you. And then they would talk to you, and you can ask questions, and you'd get all of this done, and you'd say, man, I feel a lot better hopefully parents would feel a lot better that their child who they sent to school could have this done, right? So I think it was a very generous, very welcomed activity that you could request. And so you can, I'm just saying, let's use that same thing, the same inspection list to be done, not by asking, but by code, you would have this done for short-term rentals. And so you would have the safety inspection done, but it's the same safety inspection, initiated the same way by the same individuals or individual that's currently doing it for the other residences in Pullman. And then just to answer your posting information, so if you look at both option A and option B, that posting information is a state requirement, right? I looked at the certificate, Ariel showed me that, and what she's done is created a nice looking certificate. And it includes one additional thing that the state doesn't require, and that's a non-emergency phone number. But with the exception of that, all of the information that she has on there is the same information you, as a short-term rental operator, would have to have posted in your residence. So what she did is she consolidated it into a nice-looking form, and then she added non-emergency number. But that's it, right? All short-term rental operators had to have all that posted anyway. Did they make it look as nice as she did? I don't know. Some probably did, and who knows what other people did, but it all had to be there.
Okay, but that's what I'm saying. I don't see the only difference between requiring the owner to ask for a safety inspection, the only difference between that and requiring specifically a license for a short-term rental is just saying license for a short-term rental. I mean, as I see it, that's the only real difference. The building official or the fire marshal is going to give the same inspection, no matter what they're called. And I think if we, leaving aside that $200 fee, I don't want to, leaving aside the $200 fee, I don't see any real difference between having a license for a short-term rental, which a person could post that certificate. Not necessarily post it, but have it available so that someone could see it and would have the information on it that's necessary, and would have some assurance that the building official, that the city has done something about this. I don't see the difference between the safety inspection that's required in option B and a license for a short-term rental as originally anticipated, except for the $200 fee.
John? I think you might be correct, but I think what today we're doing, there's a difference in the process. Because today we're requiring an application, which requires a plot plan and other things. It requires proof of your insurance. It requires proof of your business license, all those things. That's all part of the application, right? And the end result, the last step, is you have an inspection and you get a certificate. But there is more to the process, I think, today.
Maybe to add to that, John. So if you look, let's just take option B, for example, right? Currently, with the code that went into effect mid-last year, what Brent said is correct, right? There's a process you have to go through. With this process, this is a lot of self-attestation. There isn't somebody watching you do all of this stuff, right? You, if you run a short-term rental in Pullman, should do all of this stuff. You likely were doing most of it anyway. It's hard for me to believe that you were running a short-term rental and didn't have a smoke detector in it, right? The state requires it. It's in the code. You should do it. But likely everybody had that. Did they have a CO detector? Like Jeff probably didn't. So maybe that's a little bit of an adder. The things that Pullman is adding is a fire extinguisher, the power outage light, and then making sure if you have a water feature that you have some protection around it, a pool or a hot tub. That's it, right? But all of this would be done by the short-term rental operator, and he would get it done without city oversight, except when he calls to have the safety inspection done. But that's going to be somebody who comes out and does that, and the city would record that the person called and that they went out. But nobody's going to check that. The last thing you're going to do is register with the police department. And then you're done, right? You're in business, which is a pretty simple hurdle to get through. Now, so will we have a bunch of people that are violating this? I don't think so. But let's say we do. Let's say we have somebody who decided even this was too onerous for them to follow. And so they just decided not to do it. Maybe they forgot a couple things in here. I don't know what they would forget, but let's say they don't have a fire extinguisher and they, I don't know, maybe they have too many people in their place. And there's a complaint, right? They're going to call and do a complaint. I think they're probably going to, most residences in Pullman are going to call 911 when they really bothered by short-term rental. And that's eventually going to get passed on to the planning department, and the planning department is going to go out and do an investigation on this. And now they have a guidance, right? They have guidance to say, you're not operating correctly in the city of Pullman. We have ordinances that dictate how short-term rentals are going to be done. And the complaint might have been, I don't know what, maybe it was noise-based. That probably is the most likely complaint, even though there haven't been any of those. And they're going to do a review of whether this person is following the short-term rental ordinances that the city of Pullman adopted. But the key, I think, in what I'm saying, John, is that the dominant piece of this in option B is that this is a guidance document about how to do a short-term rental in the city of Pullman correctly, but most of it is all self-attestation. You're going to do it yourself and get it done. And there's only two pieces that even touch the city. One is the call you make to have the inspector come out, and two is that you go to the police department, pay $15, and give them the information about your rental. That's it. That's the two times you touch anybody in a city office. And that's a pretty minimal touch.
Mr. Chair? I just want to see if I'm understanding correctly. On option B, the call for the free inspection, is that this dwelling inspection checklist? Is that?
That's what they're currently using right now. That's what Ariel pulled up, is that's what the inspector would go out to your house now, right now with.
And that's what you are talking about in option B is?
In option B, yes. I spent a lot of time wording this. So the owner shall arrange for a no-cost safety inspection of an STR, City of Pullman. Any deficiencies identified will be corrected before any guest occupies this. So a couple of things here. They're going out to do a safety inspection, and it's the same. I'm leveraging off of this system, right? And this seemed like a reasonable thing to be done. They're doing it already. They're familiar with it. They know how to do it. And this seemed reasonable. Not all of it for long-term rentals would apply to short-term rentals. If you read through all of this, right, I think you'll look at some things and say, I just don't know that that's really applicable to a short-term rental. I don't know. I was hesitant, Joe, to give too much more guidance in here as to what is all included in the safety inspection. Because this, I think, is, if you look at this, it's actually kind of more than I think what's currently going on.
It's more and also less. It doesn't include anything about smoke detectors, fire extinguishers, carbon monoxide,
Right.
lights, or anything.
Yeah.
So it's like a structural checklist, not
Yeah.
a life safety checklist in some ways. I mean, sure, life safety, yeah. Is your porch in good repair? And if it's not, someone could fall and break their neck. That's life safety, I suppose. But I guess I'm not opposed to what you're suggesting, but it also excludes a lot of the specific things we've been talking about. So at that point, are we talking about amending this list or having a different list? Or, because I think the free option is great.
Yeah.
I'm not
Agreed.
against that.
And I think that was Lorena's point, right? Where like just exactly what are they inspecting? This is a little clunky for a short-term rental inspection. So how would that be done? Maybe to your point, John, I think there is an appropriate inspection that's done on a short-term rental. This checklist probably isn't it. It's probably closer to the things that they're looking at right now. So could we put in place, which I think is really almost a subset of what you're seeing in this list, right? Is there a way of giving that kind of direction? I don't know that that's something we want to dictate in code in a city ordinance, right? I love the fact that this isn't in any code, but it is on the city's website, and it is a really good guidance document. So much like I think there are other guidance documents that you could use that would help the person who's going out to do the inspection. You could even leverage off of the Airbnb listing, right? There's a whole lot of things, like you noted, that things are supposed to be done, and you're just checking that those are there.
Okay, I'm detecting consensus that we prefer option B to any of the other options, basically, broadly speaking. Anybody have any comments about that? I think I will say that I'm not fond of sending people off to read the revised Code of Washington. On the other hand, it's fairly easy. This particular part of the code is fairly easy to read, and Google will get you there pretty quickly. So I'm not terribly worried about that, especially since we're like Jeff has said and Emma said at the last meeting, people are taking a long time to get through this process. I don't think it's particularly burdensome to ask them to look up 64.37. Okay. The only issue with me, as I said, is requiring a safety inspection versus requiring basically the application and annual review that Scott has colored green and marked out. I've already explained it. Does anybody else have any comments along these lines?
I feel very strongly that the safety inspection has to happen, and it's built in here. I think, as Scott said, a revision of this form that is canted more towards the requirements and short-term rentals would probably solve the problem.
I am in favor of either of these options. I do, like Scott said, I like the fact that B is inclusive of all, I'm going to call them Airbnbs because it's not just short-term rentals right now. All Airbnbs. Doesn't matter if you're 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, owner-occupied, not owner-occupied, chicken coop, mansion. It's the same thing. If you're gonna do this, you're the same thing. And so I like the inclusivity of B. A, while the exemption follows state law, we're not doing anything unique. That's what Washington State does. And I do feel that an owner-occupied home might be statistically slightly more safe than one that isn't, just because of somebody's there all the time and you're more likely to know if there's a hazard. But that's a broad paintbrush to make that statement. But A does exclude a whole set of Airbnbs. And so B feels a little bit better to me just because everybody's in.
Okay, anybody else have any?
Yeah, I guess I just want to point out, not necessarily that I'm in favor of A, but going with B will probably reduce the number of short-term rentals that we have in Pullman. Because I think there's a number of people who do only rent their short-term rental a few times a year, and the cost will it's not worthwhile for them to do the things that they need to do. I mean, unless their house already meets all these requirements.
Jeff, can you expand on that a little bit? So in option B, assuming they were already doing what the state requires. Should we start with that assumption, or is that a bad assumption?
Well, as SDRs sit in Pullman right now, it's a bad assumption,
Okay,
because they probably don't have a business license.
yeah.
So
Yeah, I thought about
I
that.
think everything else, except for the business license.
And, yeah, it's a hard platform to, from our point of view, it's a hard platform to operate off of, right? So we already have somebody that's violating state law, and I get it. Maybe we should look at both assumptions. Let's assume that we have a number of people who are currently not following state law. They basically cleaned up a bedroom, made it safe by Airbnb standards, and they've been renting it for weekends when the hotels are full. I just gonna guess, they're probably still gonna do that. They haven't been paying attention to what we've been doing here. I'm deep involved in this, right? I can't believe that anybody wouldn't know what we're doing, but I'm pretty sure there's a lot of people out there that have no idea this is going on. And I think they're still just going to not do anything. So for the people who were operating illegally, I don't think we affected them. I think they're still going to do it. They won't even read this. They don't care about it. They don't even know what's going on. They're just going to continue renting for a couple weekends a month. I'm not sure option A or B is going to change that, right? Maybe A will if somebody at the city is scouring the different databases or the matching services and finds them and sends them a letter, maybe they'll be encouraged not to do it. Maybe. But they were already operating illegally, right? So now you're telling, right? It's a hard platform to have a discussion on. Okay, so let's go back to the person that is operating legally, right? So they're already legal. The only cost that the city of Pullman, if this ordinance is asking them to do, would be Section 3. So if they didn't have a fire extinguisher, they'd have to buy one. And this is written such that they could buy, is that an example, Ariel, of the?
So this is a 1A 10BC. So it's
Okay.
the step down from what Darren recommended. The one he had at council was like a 5A, I think. So he didn't have the actual 2. But he said this is fine. He did want to point out in both options, it did say or a special 10BC listed. He would really like to have the A on there still, just because that's pretty much most common other types of house fires you will have besides kitchen. If you use a kitchen one on a trash can that's on fire, it won't work. And I just went, interesting.
Okay. So
But
maybe-
he said this is fine if that's what the commission wants. He still says his recommendation would be the 2, just because that is what an FPA does recommend. There's even a little more, not warning, but little heads up on this side that also says the National Fire Protection Agency Association recommends the 2A. This is only 1, so. But Darren said this is perfectly fine if that's what the commission would like to, as long as we keep the A on there.
Okay. All right, so we'd have to change this a little bit. Let's see, we have recommended, is recommended, yeah. Do you know what the cost of that one is?
We looked it up. Home Depot has a 2-pack of these ones for $45.
Okay.
The 2A? Yeah.
Okay, so somewhere half of 45 would be, say, $23 up to $60. So if you didn't have a fire extinguisher, and there probably are some that don't, then you're looking at, let's just say 30-ish bucks maybe, somewhere around there. You have to buy the power outage light. What was the cost of that?
Oh, Walmart has one for like $12.
12. Okay, so round up to 15. So 30 and 15, we're at 45. And if you didn't protect your pool, you'd have that expense. That's probably a big one. If you currently have no fence around your pool, it's open for people to get in. That probably is going to eliminate people, right?
I would say if you own a pool or a hot tub and don't follow the rules explicitly and strictly, you're putting yourself at really serious risk. And I would, as I said before, my family owned a pool when we lived in California in about 1955, and it was a magnet. And it was a real safety hazard, worrying that, you go to bed at night with that large body of water in your backyard. I would say that if people have pools, spas, hot tubs, so forth, that they're just going to have to take care of themselves. I mean, what they do is up to them, but anybody who doesn't follow the rules explicitly is more foolish than we can account for.
I do just want to clarify on the fence around the pool. It's not around the pool itself. Having a fence around your property satisfies the code. So it's not even that you, around the pool itself, have to have a fence. As long as you have the fence around your property, that satisfies the code.
I'm pretty sure you can't get homeowners insurance without that kind of thing anyway, with a pool.
Yeah, if we want to talk about pools and spas sometime, that's okay with me, but I'd rather just leave it up to the building inspector. I mean, there's a requirement in the code, it's written into the code that there has to be a proper fence. I'd just as soon leave that to the building inspector.
Yeah. So I think the big difference then, if we leave pools and spas out of it, is there is that $15 registration fee in option B. There's a power outage light and a fire extinguisher, if you are already following state law. In option A, because you're excluded, you wouldn't need to go and get a state business license, right? So that would be an addition.
That's not correct. That's not correct. The state business license has nothing to do with STR code.
Yeah, okay.
So state business license is Department of Revenue requirement. It's not actually a state law under RCW. It's a requirement by the Department of Revenue. The law is you have to pay taxes if you have rental income. In order to pay taxes, you have to have a license from the Department of Revenue in order to do that. Your taxes will be zero, but the law says you have to file them. So it has nothing to do with short-term rentals. It has to do with rental income in general. If you rent half of your garage out to your neighbor so they can store their junk in it, you have to have a business license per the Department of Revenue. So, yeah, we could opine about that all day, but
Yeah.
it's actually not tied to our STR at all.
I suspect that's the thing that people have purposely ignored, right? Because it's an expense, it's a registration, it's a pain,
It's a
it doesn't
terrible
seem to serve a
website.
purpose.
Absolutely terrible website.
You file these zero income tax returns, but you have to do them 4 times and then beg for only having to do them every 12 months. So I suspect that's what keeps a lot of people from just saying it's just silliness, and so I'm not going to do it. And there's nothing in this ordinance in option B that wouldn't have them doing the exact same thing, right? I mean, they
Okay.
can just ignore, they're already ignoring state law, so
Okay, I'm willing to say I'm wrong.
they can just ignore state.
Maybe we won't lose very many SDRs. I mean, maybe with both of these, we probably will end up losing some people.
We
For those
might lose
reasons.
them, but it'll be because of a bad misconception.
But
Well, I think also, as I've said before, if we lose people, my standard is we ought to be clear about what we're requiring people to do, and we ought to have a rationale. If there's no reason to have smoke detectors in homes, then don't require a smoke detector. But I am confident that whatever we are requiring is either also required in state law, or people really, really should be doing. Not just, it would be better if you did that, but really, really should be doing. So if we lose people, we will lose, if people ignore the code, they will be ignoring safety standards, they will be ignoring things that people renting from them really have a right to expect. And they will be, and the city of Pullman ought to be offering at least some assurance to people who come here and rent on a short-term basis that we have regulations in place that will provide for their safety, just as we do for hotels and motels. We are talking about short-term rentals. We're talking about people who come here for, some people might be coming here for only 2 or 3 days and never again. In which case, I think the city ought to be assuring those people, we have standards and we have safety standards. And if people avoid those standards altogether and just rent on their own, that's up to them. But I think we ought to be providing some assurance to people who are coming here that we do have standards.
What I'd like to see is I'd like to see that our code was clear enough and concise enough that more and more people get on board with it. And we've heard from people, Carl, Emma last week, talking about the process they went through, and in a good way, and how successful it was and what they were able to do relatively easily. And then I think that can build on itself, and then we get good information out there instead of bad information, right? And if we can get to that point where there's enough people that have done this the right way and they are successful at it and they're having fun doing it, creating lodging tax revenue, creating opportunity for Pullman, I think it can build on itself. And then there's more good advice out there than there is bad advice, and we can get there. So I'm optimistic if we do this the right way, we can actually bring in some of those people who have opted out, or people who are on the gray market today, or there's a perception that it's too onerous or something. We can kind of get them in there. Even the dumb business license thing, I think you can overcome that. When enough people have done it and they can show their friend how to do it or whatever, it's clunky and cumbersome, but it can be done. And if you had a friend or your neighbor had done it last month or something and would show you what to do, you might be more inclined to give it a shot and try it. So I think we can get there.
I just want to add, what we've actually done is create a gap for someone to start a small business in Pullman to help short-term rental people with this problem. So, business.
Just to leverage, John, off of what Brent started, when I met with Ariel this week, so Whitman County Landlord Association, once a year through the Parks and Recs, does a seminar called So You Want to Be a Landlord. And you come and speak to board members about what all's involved to be a long-term, to be a landlord of a long-term rental. If that doesn't scare you off, like you almost have to be blinded thinking you're going to get rich with these long-term rentals because the Washington is a restrictive state. It's a tenant-friendly state. In fact, I just sent to the board earlier today a Zillow article that Washington ranks in this. There's 7 states that they say are the worst states to do long-term rentals in. No surprise, Washington's there. I could have not even seen the article and know that it's a very difficult state to be a landlord in. I think that we could turn this around completely, and I spoke to Ariel about this, right, where she does the equivalent of this So You Want to Be a Landlord. She would do the So You Want to Be a Short-Term Rental Operator, whatever the title of this little training is, and it lasts an hour and it's once a year. And I think in that hour, she could, and I'm suggesting maybe, the long-term rental Parks and Rec seminar, they also have other landlords come to it. So I'm suggesting other short-term rentals operators would come to it. 1 or 2 would join her. And they would talk about, this is what it's like, which is what happens currently. They'd get a really good introduction, a beautiful introduction to just really what's involved in doing this. And then, as part of this 1 hour that Ariel would spend with them, she gets them 50% of the way there through all of this administrative stuff. So instead of discouraging people from doing it, we would actually encourage people who aren't doing it right now, who aren't even, they're not doing it illegally, they're just not doing it. And they would come to this thing with the idea that they're going to learn And if they bring a few documents with them, like a house plan, they would be 50% of the way to being a short-term rental operator at the end of this 1 hour. And they'd also have gotten some really good advice from those who are currently doing it and decide whether they want to do it. So Pullman could be this really interesting community that instead of, like Leavenworth, just outright outlawing short-term rentals, we're saying we have a very unique problem here. 10 times a year, our hotels are full, and there's a solution to it. And you can be your own small business operator. And we're going to help you at this seminar almost get everything done that you need to get done. You'll understand city code. You'll see how to apply for a business license. We'll tell you the things you need to have in your house, how to register with the Pullman Police Department. We'll get all that done in an hour. And then we would be encouraging business, and we would have lodging revenue here, and we wouldn't have leakage of visitors outside of the city limits.
Yes, and I think that is an argument for having, again, an annual permit and not just requesting a safety inspection. If the first thing you have to do is apply for a permit, the very first thing you're going to do is talk to the city. And then you get Ariel being open and friendly and wanting to help. Then you get to the brochure that says, here's how you go about it. That's a big reason, I think, for wanting a permit as specified in 17.109.050, that on option B, that's completely crossed off. If we just put that back in and require a permit, that leads to the inspection, that leads to putting together all of the information you need and so forth, and doing it on a very rational and organized basis. I do want to say just very quickly, when I was employed, I had to make hotel reservations for people coming to Pullman occasionally. I was surprised at how often the hotels in Pullman are booked, Monday through Friday. It happens. It happens because of conferences. It happens because of, weekend or families visit, organized family visits and so forth. We aren't just talking about, some people are heavily oriented towards, as you said, football weekends, commencement and so forth. But there are other times when I'm sure people are looking at short-term rentals and people who just prefer short-term rentals. I think there might be a little bit more business than some people realize, but at the same time, I suspect the average STR person is heavily oriented towards football and commencement and so forth. Anyway, that's, I think, a rationale for requiring the permit, that it gets people to the city right away before they start asking friends for bad advice.
Yeah, and I did my best in that summary document to sort of say, if our focus is safety, right, if that's what we're trying to administer is safety, I think option B does that. I think option A also does it, but it also has an administrative burden, and it has additional city time from a staff member in processing all those applications. I don't know if we get more safety in option A. We do get an additional cost, and we do get a staff's time. I don't know that we've really gotten any additional safety. You're not registered with emergency personnel in option A, so you lose that safety measure, and you do have Ariel helping you through with your application, but in option B, you still have what I think is about the equivalent safety inspection. So we haven't improved safety, we have burdened a staff member, and we do have an extra fee. Currently, it's set at $200. It could change in the future. Currently, it doesn't have an annual renewal. It could change in the future. I'm just saying, if our focus is on improving safety, I don't know if we've added safety with option A. I think that safety is built in option B, which was my intent, right? Not to eliminate safety. It was to keep it paramount, knowing that that was the number one thing that, well, three things, right? Safety, removing barriers to entry, making the code very clear. And then, you know, we got a number of other letters in here, and I think they're very well written. This one from Kelsey Woolsey, but others echoed the same thing, right? Gosh, can the city of Pullman do something that helps it be more affordable for me to bring my kids here? And I think, you know, if we don't have a barrier to entry, I think there's an opportunity for people to do something or create small businesses that would help with this problem. If we have barriers to entry, I don't think people will do it. I think it'd be great to have somebody stay with them and eliminate them leaking to more to Moscow, but I just don't think they'll do it if we have barriers.
I don't think that asking people to start by visiting the planning, community development department is a real barrier. Yeah, thank you. I turn to the staff. Do you have a comment about staff workload with regard to this?
For me,
Yes.
doesn't take much out of my day. I don't know if anyone's realized the kind of lack of construction going on, and that really filled time.
Yeah, that's true too.
And we're not getting many applications. It's the thing filling my time is this and the comprehensive plan update. So I fill my time just because I don't like not being busy. I've done a lot of scanning of old files. So I can't speak on like the building safety team and what their time looks like, but.
Except that as option B is written, there will be a safety inspection. So-
Yeah, and I did chat with Jeremy about that a little bit today, whenever we want to.
Okay.
It's not great news, which is why I was letting the conversation go before I had to be the mean staff. So, because we would need to define what the safety inspection is. So if we're going based off of the dwelling inspection checklist, just kind of reiterating that more, or if we're not going based off of that, what are they checking? Because they do need to know what exactly they're looking for. Because if it is going based off of the current checklist, as option B is written, it says all deficiencies. So if they notice part of your deck is not up to code, you will have to update your deck to be able to pass. Or if they notice you're missing a handrail on your porch. So whatever it may be, you would have to update all of the things that they find. And so part of that would be, you know, if it's a 90s or newer house, interconnected smoke detectors, you know, interconnection started in the late 80s. Making sure bedrooms are meeting the size per when they were constructed. If, as RJ pointed out, like last time, like if not thinking about it, now the window doesn't open properly, but it's a bedroom, like you'd now have to replace your window. So making sure that we actually define what is gonna be looked at, because right now if they go based off of the dwelling inspection, it's a lot more invasive than the 5 things that they currently look at in the inspection that they do. And Title 17 doesn't dictate protective inspection fees, so we couldn't say it's no cost. Because if for whatever reason they start charging for those, that's what they charge. That's a building fee. That's not a Title 17 fee. And Jeremy said since the intent for the dwelling inspections were to make sure tenants weren't in substandard housing, these are now inspections for businesses, and so he would charge for them. And their base charge is $100 for an inspection. So we said, it's possible, would need to chat more about it.
Okay, so that's basically a staff issue. I mean, we can require a safety inspection, and the community development staff can work out what that means. Okay. As I said, I prefer the application for a short-term rental license compared with just requesting a safety inspection, because I think it would make everything more organized and would really, presumably the staff is going to have brochures, some direction to people that I think would be very helpful. I realize, however, that some people don't want to go to City Hall. Some people don't want an inspector. I know I pulled some electrical cable in my house recently and had it inspected by the state with some reluctance and some fear, honestly, but did it. So I understand that people have reluctance to deal with the city, reluctance to deal with building inspectors, reluctance to deal with the Department of Community Development, but I think that's the best way to do it, to start with sending people to City Hall to get started and get the right advice. Okay. We have to come to a conclusion on this. Does anybody have any further comments?
John, if in option B, what was being inspected was clearer, when, I didn't have this list when I was writing this. I couldn't find this online, so there must be something, no? I looked in that section where you can call to have this done, but I didn't see this checklist, so having looked at it, it is a little bit onerous to go through this checklist for a short-term rental. So I think you're right, we'd have to have something that is a subset of this. Currently, when they go out and do their inspection, they must be following something. Previously, we said they had to follow this, what does it say? Be performed to verify the requirements of 109.040. So I think we could go back and say that they are verifying the safety related issues in 17-109.040.
So right now, they verify that the carbon monoxide's there, if it's 2 levels, each level per code, that the smoke detectors are interconnected, that you have your fire extinguisher, you have your light, and you have your egress plan. So those are the 5 things that they currently look at.
So our current code, so I understand that, and I think that's really good, and that makes sense. So we've developed a very specific checklist. But our code is much more general. The code currently reads, a dwelling unit proposed for an STR must be inspected by the building official to determine its conformance with the standards of this chapter, 109, and basic health and safety elements as required by all applicable codes, any corrective action. So that's what we have today. It's both vague and broad. You created a very specific checklist to narrow that broad, scary thing down. I think what Scott has in his A and B is similarly kind of broad, and we'll have to do the same thing with defining to an inspector exactly what they're going to look at and what not to look at. I don't think the wording has changed that much. It's how it's implemented that we'll have to figure out.
And it's a little broad. If you watch the council meeting, as Jeremy said, it's like if they notice that there's a furnace in a bedroom, it's never been allowed by code. So like they're going to bring it up like this might not have meant to be a bedroom. Let's figure out what we can do.
That's the tough part, because I don't think we want such a rigid inspection. Okay, here's the 5 things you're going to check off. So the building inspector is going in like this, and literally it could be on fire over here, but they are not going to comment on it because it's not, there's no checkbox for, is bedroom number 2 on fire? So somehow you got to manage that, I think. And I think what you have done today is correct and is the right way to do it. I don't know how you write it into Chapter 17 code, right? There's a difference between what the code is and then the application and implementation of that. So I guess I'm saying I'm confident that we would, I keep saying we, I'm confident you guys would figure that out and it would make sense and it would not be onerous and it would not be imposing. I think we can get there. And I don't think we have to list out the checklist in the code. Does that make sense? I think you guys will figure it out and it'll be okay.
So you're suggesting, Brent, that to satisfy John's requirement, say in option B, that we would have staff rewrite what the definition of safety inspection is to be not what I have here, but perhaps a little bit more definitive than what they currently have.
I mean, if we really want to dial it in, maybe the right way to do it is to come up with the new and revised STR inspection checklist as a form or document, and then we use that same wording in here, right? And then it kind of ties, even though this isn't zoning code. It's a form, but the language, and that way if somebody reads that and they say, well, what is this? Well, there's a document, they can actually see what it is. That's kind of what we're doing now. Does that make sense? That's what I would propose, is we come up with this form a little bit first with Jeremy or whatever, and then whatever it's titled, we use that same word.
Yeah, I think overall, Joe is correct that, or you're correct that the building inspector is not going to have blinders on. It's going to be really hard for a building inspector to go into a room and realize this window can't be opened and it's a bedroom and it's right next to the furnace, to a gas-fired furnace.
Right.
A building inspector is going to, if that window could open, it would be legal. It's going to be hard for a building inspector to say, oh, this is fine, I'll sign it. Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, I don't think we want it to.
On the other hand, a loose board on a deck is not going to rise to the level of, you need to do something about this. I think we don't want to, we can't restrict the building inspector. We can't say, no, don't look at things. But we can say, ensure that the basic safety standards of short-term rentals are met in this short-term rental. And we've spelled it out. I mean, it's there. It's pretty obvious. Okay. I still don't see a consensus or a conclusion on application for short-term rental license from the city versus just requesting an inspection.
Well, I think we learned two things here, right? So what I heard Ariel say is that we can't dictate the cost in section 17109, right? So the word no cost needs to come out of there. My definition seems insufficient. The current definition seems a little bit ambiguous. So if we could clean up that wording to take mine to be, so we'd have to improve my wording, maybe improve a little bit on what's currently there. I like the idea of I don't know if we can say this is the only thing they can look at, but I think people would feel more comfortable if they said, oh, well, that checklist seems pretty reasonable to me. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean it's the only thing that they can check, right? I think if it's obviously unsafe, and we wouldn't want somebody to say, I know, but it's not on the checklist, so I can't do anything about it. We wouldn't want that to happen. But in general, the checklist is a very good guidance document. These are the typical things that the inspector is going to look at. So we don't scare people away. I think right now, what I heard Brent say is that it almost scares people away, right? When you open up your house for basic health and safety elements as required by the applicable codes, that's so broad, who knows what's going to happen when they're out there. And while we're operating professionally right now, it could get out of control at some point. Wouldn't anticipate that, but something in between, I think, right? Something that it could be improve my wording a little bit and offer this checklist. And that would give some assurance to those considering short-term rentals to not look at this and say, there's no way I'm doing that.
Okay, any ideas? So one way or the other, there is going to be an inspection.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Well, under A, there's not if it's 2 bedrooms or less
Right,
owner
that's right.
occupied.
Yeah. Yeah, if we go
And
back.
that might be 70% of, what Scott said, that might be 70% of Airbnbs in Pullman. Again, because they're going to be Airbnbs, but they're not going to be STRs. So those 70% are not going to be inspected.
Yeah. I struggled with A or B, John. I've leaned towards A at some point, and I've leaned towards B at some point. I think 70% is a fairly reasonable estimate as to 70% of people in Pullman wouldn't have to do anything if we choose option A.
Does staff have a preference between A and B?
Not really.
Not really.
Okay, I think the really fundamental difference is the one or two bedroom issue. Under state law, they are not short-term rentals, they're excluded from regulation. I prefer to regulate them for the sake of assuring people coming here for short terms that the city has done something about safety on short-term rentals.
I understand, I mean, I stay in a lot of Airbnbs. I look to the owner and the person I'm renting from, whether they've made it safe or not. I really don't have any, I mean, I was just skiing in Utah. I have no confidence that the city of Salt Lake City did anything to ensure my safety at that Airbnb I stayed at. Now, the owner certainly did, but that's just me. I don't.
Okay, so are you inclined to exclude one and two bedrooms?
I go both ways.
Okay,
It
well-
is consistent with the state. To Jeff's point, excluding that group may have a few more people to do it. It feels better to be inclusive and all rentals are the same. B feels better, just on a philosophy standpoint. I think A is perfectly acceptable. I will not lose sleep with either one of these two options.
So if we're going to talk philosophy,
Yeah.
I mean, I always come back to the same point, that we're trying to regulate something and we don't have any problems with it. And so, I mean, that's what makes me tend to lean towards A, because it's the one that's has the least regulations on people. I mean, I just fundamentally or philosophically have a problem regulating, and even you can say safety, and that's fine. I mean, it's hard to argue against safety, but we don't have any problems. Nobody's complained. We haven't had any safety problems. And so we're creating code for a problem that doesn't exist. And that's the reason why I would tend to lean towards A. And the other part of my philosophy is I do like to have things be consistent. And so, again, that moves you back to B.
Yeah.
And so it's difficult, but in the end, I mean, if I had to choose between the two, I would pick A, because I don't believe that we should regulate things that don't need to be regulated. And when we have a problem, then we fix it.
Okay, except we're dealing with some really serious safety issues, and having a problem would be quite
But there
literally.
is no documented safety problems that we've had.
Okay.
And there's lots of things that we could find in the city and things that we could do with code that would increase the safety of the citizens. And it's just, if there's no problem, it doesn't make sense to try to fix it.
Okay, so wait a minute. Okay, so you're in favor of option A, or at the very least excluding one and two bedrooms?
Yes.
Okay, anybody else?
So the way I read this, in A, we have two different levels, and we have owner occupied, they're regulated here, bare minimum state, right? And pretty much excluded. Excluded, yeah. They're still business license or whatever, but okay. So A, we have some here and we have some here, as far as like regulation. Under B, they both move to here. B doesn't move everybody down to here, and B doesn't move everybody up here. And it's not really in the middle either. So I'm with Jeff. It's
Okay, so you're in favor of option A?
I'm agnostic.
Okay, Joe?
I don't think you get to be, first of all.
Yeah, you know, that's right, you have to vote. Jeff or Joe?
I'm curious, in a situation like this, is it possible to reopen public comment on a specific question?
We've had a lot of comments about this, I'm not sure.
Well, just this specific A versus B in this conversation where nobody on this bench cares one way or the other, it seems.
Oh, some of us do, Kara.
Okay. All right. Well, so I take it the answer is no.
I prefer not to open.
Okay, okay. I lean toward A, but not by much.
I watched RJ show some concern what Jeff was talking about. And I know what you were thinking, right? Your thought was, I've heard you say this, right? Because we haven't had an incident doesn't mean we can't have an incident, right? So we don't want to wait for a child to be run over or something, some event to occur prior to doing reasonable things ahead of time to make sure it doesn't happen. And I wrestle with that, right? I land on Jeff's side. Dominantly, the system takes care of itself. Could we have a rogue operator? We could have a rogue operator. What I would love to see us do is to not go overboard on short-term rental safety, and I think this is a bit overboard, until we've gone and looked at what is causing the problem, and we know we have safety concerns in long-term rentals. So can we make inroads in that and learn from it? And once we've learned from it, if we think we're deficient in the short-term rentals, safety inspections, come back and clean it up. But I hate for us to start there because like Jeff said, it's not the problem. I have stayed in a lot of short-term rentals, and I've never depended upon the city to make sure they're safe. The operators always do a wonderful job there. I've also seen, because I'm on, somehow I got onto this board with Airbnb where I get to communicate with people at Airbnb, that there are many times where somebody has shown up to a property and they feel it's unsafe. However, they've envisioned this place being safe, they show up and they don't feel it's safe. And so they're not willing to stay there and they leave and they want their money back. And Airbnb universally refunds their money. It upsets owners because they're like, show me that my place is unsafe. But Airbnb lands on the side of the guest. If you feel it's not safe, you call up Airbnb, you walk away, they give you your money back, and hopefully the owner got some advice on what it is they need to improve. But so the system, not only the review system works really well, but guests know that they can walk away from something they perceive as being unsafe. Whether it's unsafe or not, they don't have to care. It's just if they perceive it, they get their money back. So the system works really well, RJ. That's why I know we don't have to have an accident before we put safety measures in place, but I don't think this is the place to start until we've learned something with cleaning up areas in Pullman where there are safety concerns with rentals, and then inject it into this code.
Can I comment on that?
Oh yeah, love it.
Safety should be the number one concern. Compromising on safety is a dangerous game to play.
Yeah.
Waiting for something tragic to happen, I don't want that on my conscience. Selfishly, I don't want that on my conscience. I don't want to be tierce, but is this the planning department or the reactionary department? Sure. Is this the planning commission, the reactionary commission? We're going to wait for someone to die and then have regulations? I don't know if I'm on board with that.
So
We're going to wait for something tragic to happen? Don't know if I agree with that. I would say that to the council.
So do you think that we've covered all the safety problems that can exist in an Airbnb?
I think the code now addresses a majority of them in the simplest way possible.
I mean, the majority of the deaths and accidents in Airbnbs are from slips and falls, and we have nothing that actually deals with that. I mean, it's really hard to get data on this, but I mean, the other thing is carbon monoxide. The majority of the people who've died in Airbnbs has been from carbon monoxide poisoning. And they had carbon monoxide detectors in most of those houses, and they didn't work. Because carbon monoxide detectors do fail quite often. noticed that. So, I mean, I don't disagree with you. I want things to be safe. I just don't think that if we don't, I just think passing regulations to try to make things safe, you need to understand what you're trying to make it safe from. And there's plenty of things that we can try to make safer in Pullman, and probably a lot of them would be a lot more effective than these safety regulations.
Yeah, but we're talking about short-term rentals tonight.
So, I know we're talking about short-term.
I don't want
rentals,
someone to die.
But
And
I'm
to
just saying
compromise
that, I mean,
that,
we're
it's
spending all
really
our
not
time on
acceptable.
short-term rentals when
To compromise
if there's
life-
other
life and
places we could
safety?
make a bigger impact.
I'm not gonna do that.
That's where we should make an impact.
You want to compromise life and safety? I don't.
I don't want to compromise life and safety. I'm saying that these aren't going to these regulations aren't necessarily going to make it any safer.
Completely disagree.
So, and so I don't think so. I would, okay.
Okay. all right.
Anyway, I mean, so you just believe that we can have regulations with no problems. And I just think that that's one of the reasons why people hate regulations and code so much. It's because they see this doesn't apply to them.
Lorena.
So,
I think, these are heavy philosophical questions. And it's true, there's really nothing that we can do to stop somebody from slipping or falling or anything else like that. But, we can make an effort. And I, the more I think about it, the more I like option B. And part of the reason is because I don't think it's that rigorous. Turns out we have to have a fee, $100. Okay, that's less than $200. That's less than the $500 that you currently have to have with the hearing inspector, and that's less than what Airbnb recommends in their own regulations. So I don't think that's unreasonable. The other things I don't think are that unreasonable either. And to be honest, as I've gone through this whole thing with the Planning Commission, I've looked at my own house, and I have actually purchased some things that I didn't have because I recognize the value of all of this. I really like the consistency of B. It applies to everyone. And I also think it gives a better experience to the renter, to the short-term renter, because they know when they come to Pullman, there's going to be a registration certificate. It's always going to have the same information. It's going to be consistent. They know they can count on that. So they know exactly where to go to get that information, and it provides a consistent experience. So I recognize that there are, rings to climb, you know what I'm trying to say. I recognize that there are barriers, but I don't think these barriers are unreasonable in the name of safety for what we're talking about. We're not asking for a huge amount. We're asking for, a fire extinguisher. We're asking for, it turns out, $100. We're asking for a little bit of process. I don't think that's that bad.
I will say, with regard to Jeff's point, that we can't identify every safety issue. As far as I know, everything that we are requiring is recommended by Airbnb itself. And so somebody going to an Airbnb would be quite legitimate in saying, there's no contact information, there's no emergency number in this Airbnb, it's unsafe, and I'm going to leave. We can't foresee everything that's entirely true, but we can go to Airbnb itself and see what the platform recommends, and that's what this code does.
Mr. Chair, I have one opinion, and then I have a question for RJ. So one of the things I think we do need to consider is we are making things less safe when we push people to the gray market. And we know specifically of people who are no longer using Airbnb because of the city regulations, and they're using Coug Central and other Facebook messages and everything, and I believe that is fundamentally making things more unsafe. So I am concerned that code done wrong or whatever can make things unsafe because it forces the gray market. I'm very concerned about the gray market. My question to RJ is just, and you don't have to answer, you don't want to, but do you feel that Scott's option A and B are somehow less safe than the code we have today? And then the second part is, do you think between A and B, one of the two of those is less safe, in your opinion?
Those are good questions. I don't know if I have a intelligent answer for that. What I
Okay.
would say is that I think the existing code with the basics at minimal expense to save or to prevent a tragic event should be in there. A fire extinguisher, a smoke detector, carbon monoxide, basic inspection, a flashlight. People are going to fall. People are going to cut themselves with a knife. Those things are going to happen. I don't want someone to die.
All right.
I don't think anybody does. So why are we, I don't understand why we're even debating that at such minimal cost. If it's, as John pointed out, if it's on the Airbnb recommendations, why would we deviate from those? At what cost? I feel like this is a risky game to play.
And I understand that, but if A and B, if the options A and B, they both include all those things you just listed from the existing code. So when you read A and B, was there something that jumped out at you that is less safe than the current code?
What I think staff should do is let Planning Commission go through their process and deliberate the items.
Okay.
Have you folks come to a conclusion with a final recommendation to council. Allow staff, some here, some downstairs, to review and to analyze what that is, and then reconvene and discuss once more. So whatever is in A or whatever is in B is a little bit, I don't want to say unimportant, but the final version of whatever the Planning Commission recommends, I think would need to have some staff time to analyze those type of items.
So if we kind of landed on an A or B tonight, we have another meeting a month from, would that be enough time for you guys and downstairs to look at it and kind of pick it apart?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I would like to expedite this because we've been talking about
Yes.
this since I was 5. If we need to do another special meeting mid-month next month, mid-March, early March, to get through this and go on to other things that are important, let's do that.
Okay.
It would not take weeks and weeks. It would take me calling a meeting with my staff, grab the fire marshal, we'll sit down for 90 minutes and we'll go through it.
Okay. To that end, is it worth asking you to do both A and B with your staff and see if there's something that your staff feels that there's a difference in safety between A and B?
We could certainly do that.
Or do you think it's better we just pick one?
I would prefer that you get to a 90%
Okay.
version. We'll analyze that, because I feel like there's been so much
Yeah.
review of things, and then items change, and then it eventually evolves into something that it didn't start out to be.
Yep.
Yes, I'm inclined to think we
To pick
we
or an
we
A or
need to
B.
make decisions tonight.
Okay, yep.
Joe?
I like option B with the caveat that it's a free version of the safety inspection that happens today.
As I said, we cannot guarantee another division's fee schedule in Title 17.
That's understood, but that's what I like.
Okay,
We
well,
talked about last week, though, we talked about we could make a recommendation.
Yeah.
It's council's decision, right? And so.
That's,
but
I'm
we could
sorry,
make a
that is
rec-
what I was trying to say.
Yeah, and we could point out some of those things that we've heard about, like the lodging tax and the revenue it generates, and we could maybe recommend to city council.
I thought that's what
Yeah,
we were talking
yeah,
about. Here's
okay,
what are we going to
okay.
recommend? And
Yep.
that's what I would recommend.
Yep, okay.
Okay.
Option B with a free version of what is happening today. Because I think the safety inspection stuff that's happening today is good.
okay. And as of today, the building inspector would charge $100 for a safety inspection.
That is the minimum they charge for inspections, yes.
Okay,
But not for this one, correct?
No, but as Jeremy said, that is for the tenants to make sure that they're not in substandard housing, and this would be an inspection for a business.
yes, that's right.
Okay.
Okay, so, from my right, you're arguing for option B, is that correct, Joe?
B, but not exactly as written. Is that okay?
With,
Or do I have to say,
no, the real issue in my mind is, are we going to exclude 1 or 2 bedrooms? If we're going to include 1 or 2 bedrooms in the regulation, then it's option B, and we would make changes to option B.
I guess the reason I'm talking about this addendum is because of, I mean, everybody is in agreement that safety is the issue, and I'm not sure the way it's written, I like the way safety is addressed. And so that's why I'm adding this addendum to my comment. But yeah, option B.
Okay, so that would bring 1 or 2 bedrooms into the short-term rental regulation in
If
City
I'm
of Pullman.
understanding it correctly, apologies, I have this cough drop
Yeah.
in my mouth. If I understand correctly, I mean, I'm feeling like B is a little safer, right? Because everybody has to be inspected,
Yeah,
right? So I am leaning toward B for,
okay.
partly for that reason. But I don't love the way the safety aspect is written in the option B.
Okay. Brent?
I'm B.
Okay, I'm B.
Probably leaning more towards A now, and here's my reasoning. I think that RJ, that's a real balance, right? No one on this commission wants something bad to happen to people, so I'm really trying to balance the safety aspect with the fee or the barriers to entry. We have a lot of letters that indicate there's an opportunity in Pullman for these businesses if we can get them done. And the more barriers we put in front of people, the less likely they are to open a business, right? So option A, I think, puts fewer barriers in front of people. Does it compromise safety? I'm not sure that it does. But 70% of those opening these businesses in Pullman, they won't have to go through this process, right? We're going to have to trust that they're good operators. I think it's easy to trust them because, in general, they do a good job. But could there be some rogue operators? Here's what I think is more likely. I think no matter if we put up barriers, we will push people to the gray market. And that gray market audience, those are the ones we have to be the most careful about. So it is not fair to say that we need to put serious, onerous, expensive safety first because that will make things safer. I don't believe that statement. You will just push people to the gray market, as I've already seen them do, right? They already advertise outside of methods that would allow them to be tracked. And I think that makes things less safe. So to simply say, lay on a bunch of safety standards will make things safety it's not correct. It actually makes things less safe. And because we push people to a gray market. So I think A is a compromise between the removal of barriers, allowing people to open small businesses in their home, and if you're running a business, say an entire house, then you need to go through the formal inspection and the application, right? I wish we didn't have to do that, but I don't see that we can back out of that. So I see option B might be just as expensive as option A. I mean, Ariel's not speaking for the inspector. He may decide that fee is still, or that inspection is still a $200 inspection. So option B could have a $200 inspection. I tried to make it no cost, but it could be that he charges $200.
Mr. Chair, I'm with Joe and Scott. To me, I'm B because there's a safety inspection. A has an application and a safety inspection. So to me, option A is inherently going to be more expensive or more barriers. And that's Since they both have the same safety requirements and they both have the safety inspection, A doesn't have an application. I mean, A has an application and B doesn't. That's why I lean towards B. But if you start putting an application into B, and so they're the same thing, then I'm A. So that's the caveat,
Okay,
right?
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But,
I'm B as written.
but A, Brent, also excludes 70%
Yes.
of the homes or the people who want to start small businesses. They wouldn't have to file an application.
That is true.
So 3/4 of the market can go into business without much of a barrier.
Yes.
Yeah. And so, yeah,
Okay.
that's why I advocate for A.
Okay, Joe.
I feel unsafe.
Funny.
I mean, honestly, I really think Airbnbs are safe. And I think that either one of these is going to be fine. I mean, I'm just against regulating things that we don't have a reason to regulate. And that's the main thing. And I don't want people to die. I don't think that anything we're putting in here is going to stop anybody from dying. I really don't. I mean, if there's a house fire, there's a potential that people are going to die in a house fire, even if you have smoke detectors or even if you have fire extinguishers. And I don't think either one of these is inherently more safe than the other. I didn't have any problem actually with the other code. I just thought it was complicated and then was going to discourage people. I think both of these versions are way more straightforward. And A, I think, has the least amount of barriers, and so that's what makes me want to favor A. But I'm totally willing to compromise, and I'll do whatever the commission wants to do, honestly. I don't really have a huge bias in either direction, because we are going to regulate something, and so I can't do anything about that.
Okay, Lorena.
I'm for B with the caveat that staff rewrite the inspection checklist to be inappropriate for a short-term rental, given the requirements that we have.
Okay, do you want to say something?
I was just gonna devil's advocate a little bit here for both options, honestly. So for A, we're exempting. What stops anyone from just telling us that they're doing 2 rooms, but they're doing more? At least option B, we're looking at all of them, regardless. And then for both, I can't dictate other departments in my code, even other divisions within my department. It's just that the inspectors said that they would do the inspection since they're life safety. So if Jeremy comes back and says, we're not going to increase our workload to do these safety inspections at no cost, then what? We've already kind of chatted with Chief Brashears about the rental registry, and he has already said he doesn't want short-term rentals in there. But we can have more conversations with him around it. But if he says no, then what? So it's like, there's a lot of things that it's really dependent on how other departments want to handle this. I can only dictate land use and zoning in Title 17.
Mr. Chair,
Okay, Joe.
is it not up to the city council? It's up to the departments?
I mean, hopefully, city council wouldn't approve something that another department hasn't already given their blessing on.
Okay, okay.
So it would go to city council, but part of it would be, staff has this section in there. After, talking with Chief Brashears, with police, they don't want this part in there. But if that's what you all recommend, that's what we will take. But we will have to tell them that we talked with police and they're not in favor of this. We chatted, we talked with the building official. They are not in favor of increasing their workload for this. And so we would have to tell city council, we talked with them and here's what they said. And then it's up to council if they truly keep it in or not. And then now we're not playing nice with the police department. But I can't just go, you're now going to do this.
Right, okay.
Mr. Chair. Just one clarification. So in option B, the rental registration, I did speak with Chief Brashears in depth about this, and he understands it. And I said, is it okay if I quote that you're okay with short-term rentals being added to the database? And he said yes.
So that is changed since we last talked to him about it.
Yeah, and that was at the goal setting at the library, right? And at the beginning of the conversation, I'm not sure that he was in favor of it, but we talked a lot about what short-term rentals are, what medium-term, what long-term. And in the end, I said, it's okay if I quote you, right? And he gave me his assurance it's okay to quote him. But, you know, you need to check with him. But I didn't put it in here until I had that conversation with him. So I know that unless he's changed his mind since the goal setting at the library, it was okay to put this in here.
I have a follow-up question about the building inspector workload. Under option B, I think it would be the same workload they have now, right? Because they'd be inspecting every STR, every Airbnb, right? Option A, their workload goes down because, like Scott says, we're eliminating maybe 70% of them, right? Is that a fair assumption? So,
I can't speak on how many would fall under that exemption. I don't
yeah,
know.
okay. But, so if there is a concern about, like, building inspectors dedicating time to short-term rentals, option A does reduce their commitment to short-term rentals. So that's a concern, I mean. All right, I'm on A.
Okay, I'm a little confused. The building inspector does not want to be inspecting short-term rentals, is that correct?
No, I'm just saying if he comes back and, they don't have the extra capacity, depending on what we decide what the safety inspection is, because sometimes the dwelling inspections can take like an hour. Right now, they go in, they're like, here's the little can of smoke, cool, all the alarms are going off, reset that, you got your carbon, you got your fire extinguisher,
Right.
there's your light, there's your evac plan, thanks.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what we're saying, that we want the short-term rental inspection to be focused on the safety requirements for short-term rentals.
But as of right now, with how this is written, and if this is what we take to the departments to talk to them, or the divisions, whatever you want to call them,
Okay.
that's going to be a question.
Okay, but if we go back to the part that Scott marked off, 17.109.050, inspection. An inspection by the city's building official will be performed to verify the requirements of 17.109.040 and basic safety. And then if we stop it there, an inspection by the city's building official will be performed to verify the requirements of 17.109.040. We stop it there. I think Brent's correct that it's going to be awfully hard for a building inspector to see something really blatant and say, oh, this is fine. But if we stop it there, then the only requirement is to look for the smoke detectors, the fire extinguisher, and so forth.
I think we want them doing what they're doing today. I think
Yeah.
there's been a lot of concern about the inspection, but the feedback we've gotten is the actual inspections have gone pretty well. And so I don't think it's our intention in either this option A or B to change what they're doing today or to increase their workload. That wasn't the intention. So we have to just figure out wording that doesn't do that. To me, the wording isn't a lot different than what exists today. But if there's a way to write it better, I'm all for it.
Sorry.
Yeah. I'm good now, I think. Yeah, that just goes to the point of revising the checklist, I think, to make it match what Scott has and what the short-term rentals do. And it's possible, to cover the issue of blinders, perhaps we could just include an other that would allow, if there's a fire, we can't do that, it has to be very specific.
People get upset if you just say other, because what does that mean?
Got it, that makes sense. Okay, then we just do what it has. And I suppose, if something is really bad, the inspector will find a way.
Yeah, I think if something is really bad, the homeowner's going to want to do something. It's hard for me to imagine that somebody would invite somebody from out of town to stay in a bedroom without a functioning window.
Mr. Chair, so John, if you look at option A, the application and annual permit, do you agree with that wording where it says inspection? Is that pretty similar to what you read?
Yes,
An
yes.
inspection by the building official will verify compliance with this section and basic health and safety elements, and then you have to correct any issues before you can get your permit.
I think it's important to point out, though, I want to make sure people understand, option A is not word for word what the code is today, right? It's been rewritten. It's not redlined, green-lined. So option A is a rewrite, pretty much a complete rewrite, different words, different phrasing, everything, same intention, but it's completely rewritten from what the code is today, from 109 today. A is a complete rewrite. B has a red and green markup, so you can see the difference between A and B. But, so the application as written in A is different than the application today.
Yep, that's true. Yeah.
The application today, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but RL is looking at business license, insurance, some of those other things. In option A, it now says the city will review the application to verify compliance with section 17-109-040. So the application review is only looking at safety. The application review is not looking at insurance.
Wasn't that part of the state requirements? So
It
you
is.
would have to have it anyway, the
It
insurance?
is, but we're
yeah.
just saying the city staff isn't going to spend time double checking that.
In 104 of A, it does say business license must be applied for. So if we're saying we're verifying that you're meeting these, or does it just say safety? I was just looking at it.
Oh, you're right, okay.
So yeah, it
Because
says
104.
compliance with
All right, you're absolutely right, yeah.
section.
Yeah.
So we would be verifying business license, payment of taxes, the consumer safety, the liability insurance, smoke detectors, posted information, occupancy.
Okay, you're right. Yep, I'm wrong. So it's rewritten, but it maybe isn't different.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I was wrong. Sorry about that. Thank you.
Brent, since you asked, I like A.
Okay.
One vote for A.
Can you say why?
Yeah.
I do like the way that it's written. It's a little bit more concise. It makes, I think to the average reader, it's going to be more logical. It feels, you talked about feelings last week.
Yeah, I'm big at the feelings.
It
Yeah.
feels like less. Feels like less of a obstacle course to get a permit. It feels more logical, like I said. I
It
think it
does.
comes across more logical. It doesn't feel burdensome. It covers the basics, like I said, with safety.
Are you okay with the exemption, the 2-bedroom or less owner occupied? Because you've
Kind-
expressed in the fact that in the past that makes it awkward. And Ariel just mentioned, how do you know, right? How do you?
Yeah, that's another thing, that when you talk about the enforcement aspect,
Yeah.
how do you know? How do you know? Like, it becomes really, really difficult. How does staff determine one way or the other if it was 2 bedrooms or 3 bedrooms? If the person lives there 6 months out of the year or not? If the person is left-handed or right-handed? Like, how do you verify things? It becomes a real challenge. And I don't know if I have a good answer to that.
Right. okay.
Other than the way we have it worded in our current code, where everything, whether they're there 6 months out of the year or not, whether they're there when the renters are there, whether they live in Texas, it doesn't matter. Whether it's 1 room, whether it's 8 rooms, doesn't matter. That way it takes the burden, we talk about burdens all the time, takes the burden of trying to figure out what is true, what is accurate off of staff,
Right.
and puts everything into one box.
So that one reason is one of the in my mind, what you just expressed is one of the biggest reasons for B. But you're still saying that you think A is better in spite of that.
Maybe there's aspects of B
Yeah.
to incorporate into A.
Okay, are you arguing essentially for A without the exemption? So just.
I don't mind the exemption as much as I prefer the safety. I'll put
Okay.
it that way. If we were going to put a hierarchy of what I like, it's, I don't want anybody to die, and like I told Brent last week, hierarchy is, I don't want anybody to get hurt or die, and 2, let's get as many people to Pullman as possible. After that, it's all really minutia.
The only difference that for me, the biggest difference between A and B is the exemption in A, which I don't like. And there's also the application and annual permit in A that is removed in B. And the requirement for the safety inspection in B, that A includes in an application and annual permit. Okay. Anybody have any?
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
So RJ, here's where it's hard for me, right? If we're talking about people that are going to cheat, it's a different conversation, right? How do we prohibit people from cheating? And it's in every law we pass in society philosophically, right? There's this thing about, are people going to follow the law? Hot topic right now, immigration, right? Do people follow the law? Obviously, millions don't. Can we guarantee people are going to follow this ordinance? We have people clearly doing short-term rentals right now. They have for a decade. You have an ordinance in effect right now. They're still doing them. They don't read this. They don't care. They're just doing them. They're cheating. Will we have cheaters no matter what we pass? We can have strict, even if you passed a rule that you can't even have a short-term rental in Pullman, we'd have people who have short-term rentals in Pullman. They would do it. There's an underground market right now, and it's very effective. So it's hard for me to think about doing the ordinance so that we have maybe a few less people cheat. I think if we make the ordinance very straightforward, easy, REL does a class, we make it inviting, we'll have a lot more compliance. If we make it hard, we're not going to have compliance. The gray market will fill up because the gray market is pretty accessible. It's working really well right now. So that it's just hard to know, right? I'd rather write an ordinance where we think that people will abide by the ordinance and get us a best ordinance for those that play fairly. And then there are some people who cheat at the game, and I hope they get caught, right? There is a few ways to find them if they choose to advertise on Airbnb and they followed none of these ordinances. Let's say we do option A, where they have to have 2 bedrooms or less, and they didn't register with the city because they took that exemption. And you see them advertising 4 bedrooms for rent, 12 people, 10 people, whatever it is, clear violation, right? So there are some ways to pick up on the cheaters, but in general, I think if we have a very fair written ordinance that's clear, people will follow it. Because this isn't neither of these, A or B, is very onerous, right? It's not hard to do this, especially if we help shepherd them through. But even if we didn't shepherd them, it's not that hard to do.
I think if we're waiting to write a code in which everybody will follow directions,
Yeah.
we'll be here until 2030. I mean, we have a department in this city that takes up 30% of our budget for people that can't color between the lines. So no matter what we put together, there's going to be somebody who will not want to do that.
Sure.
Right? It's difficult to get a driver's license, but people drive without getting a license. So I don't know where I land on that, because
Yeah.
whatever we do, it's going to be difficult. We had people that didn't want to get a conditional use permit before and went about their way. We have people now with the current code, which I think is easier than what we did in the past, and they still go about their way. If we said, just give me $50 and we won't inspect anything, people would still not do that.
Agreed.
right? So I don't know, I agree with you, Scott. I don't know where to draw the line on where and when people will not follow because it's too difficult. I think that's going to always be the case. We could even hand out $50 so people would just come in and sign an application. I mean, they still wouldn't do it.
Yeah. And I had that in mind when I wrote A and B, right? That the idea was to make it safety paramount, right? This is a safety first. Secondly, remove barriers. Third, make it easy to follow. And then I wrote an unbiased document about why I'd be okay with A or B. But what tipped me towards A tonight was in B, I attempted to remove the barrier of cost. And that attempt failed, right? Tonight, Ariel told me, you can't remove that barrier. There's going to be cost in B. It's coming in there. Because you, a planning commission member, can't dictate to a department that they don't charge. So, all right, so now B's got a cost involved with it, and it could be the same cost, the same $200 that they're going to pay in A. So then I started thinking, well, now we've re-entered the barrier into B. And that's why I tipped back towards A then, because that cost barrier. And I think A achieves safety. So in my mind, A has safety paramount, and it removes a cost barrier for somebody who lives in the house and rents out a bedroom on an event weekend. And that's why I landed on A.
Okay. As I see it, however, most of us are landing on B with the idea that the safety inspection should be focused on specifically the short-term rental requirements. Joe?
This may shock you, but I've been swayed to A.
I think that puts us 5-1 at A.
No, it puts us 4-2 at A.
Are you B, John?
Yes,
Oh, okay.
it puts us 4-2 at A. Okay. Okay. Back to A.
Well, and then we have RJ's vote.
I don't know if staff gets a vote, but since Brent asked, ultimately, we're going to have to pick something
Sure.
Okay,
before 2030.
sorry. Yeah. And, yeah, 2030 in my world is 8:30 in the evening. And we're beyond that. Okay, so this does include the application and annual permit. And that, does that, yes, that includes the inspection. Okay. Anybody else have any changes you want to make on A? Oh, one thing I do want, I think we do need to have an enforcement provision, just reference to 17.10. But I think this does need to say that this chapter will be enforced in accordance with City Code 17.10, and then put the enforcement provisions in the other chapter. So in Brent's comment last week, we don't want to start listing, here's what's going to happen if you screw it up. But I do think we need to have in this chapter, 17.109, we do need to have in this chapter a reference to 17.10 that specifies sanctions, violations.
So then, are we going to add that to every other section of 17?
If it's necessary to say,
Under RV parks, under,
is,
I mean,
are the,
tiny home, we never mention it anywhere else. It's just given.
I think, however, we're oftentimes dealing with small business people whom we need to direct there so that they know what the consequences are.
The state law does talk about class 2 misdemeanor, blah, 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 or something. It's got some stuff in there too. I'm not opposed to it, John. I don't think it's necessary, and I'm just trying to keep this as short as sweet as possible, and if it really absolutely does not add anything to safety, I'd prefer not to have it in there. I just think the more words, the more barrier it becomes, even if it's innocuous.
Okay, anybody else?
As long as there is an enforcement, and which we do have, I'm okay with it being in a separate place. The important thing is to have it, not where it's located.
Okay. Okay. Does anybody have any changes that you want to make then in option A? As I said, we are sending people off to the revised Code of Washington, but I think in this case, it's easy to find, it's pretty easy to read, it's fairly obvious.
I don't have any changes to A, but I think what we're talking about is staff is going to take A away. Ariel already mentioned maybe one on the fire extinguisher, right? So I think there's, what we're asking is for staff to come back with some red lines to A, which we already know the fire extinguisher is going to be one of them.
Okay. Anybody else?
I think I'm just looking at 1710, John, or I guess this is 1705, the penalties, but I tend to lean with Brent. I think that discussing penalties in here when we don't discuss it anywhere else, and it doesn't improve safety. In fact, one could argue that if putting that enforcement thing in here pushes one person to the gray market, we've actually decreased safety. I just don't think we want to get into a precedence of adding enforcement in here when we don't do it any other place, especially, I think to me, it's a given. If there's an ordinance, there's got to be some mechanism, right? I think that there's got to be a mechanism that they do enforcement in it. I may not be seeing it, but it's got to be there. Just common sense tells me it's got to be there.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, so what are the directions to staff at this point? To start with option B.
A.
I'm sorry, I said that wrong. Yeah, don't panic, I said that wrong. Start with option A. And add information about the fire extinguisher. Anything else?
I still think if we can, the whole idea of taking the checklist that you have now and whatever it's titled, using that same wording in our code, I think that would be a benefit. So if somebody, to your point, people always ask, what does this mean? You'd be able to say, well, here's the sheet, and the words would match. I think that'd be a benefit. So I would propose that edit as well.
Okay, in the inspection, paragraph 17.109.050, application and annual permit, 1B is the inspection. And inspection by the building official. That would make reference specifically to the checklist that the building official will use.
Yeah, I would
Okay.
just use the same title,
Okay.
just for clarity.
Okay, okay.
Is that-
But 040 is the checklist.
Yes, but
But you have a form, you've mentioned that there's a checklist they have that has 5 things on it or something?
Yeah, it's the fire extinguisher, smoke alarms, carbon.
But does that form have like a heading on it or anything?
It's built into the permit system, so
Oh,
the
it's in
only
the one-
person who sees that is the inspector as they're going through and saying, yes, they have this, yes, they have this, no, they don't have that, yes, they have this.
Okay. All right, so then maybe it's fine as written then.
okay,
Okay.
anything else?
This is what staff is going to look at. We're not talking about what we're recommending to council yet, right? That'll come after staff
Well,
looks
but-
at it, comes back to us,
Oh,
and then
shoot.
we'll make a recommendation at that point, correct?
Well, it will come back to us.
Before our recommendation is made to council.
Yes, it will
Yes.
come
Yeah,
back to
okay.
us before.
This is not a public hearing.
Right, that's right, okay.
Yes.
So, no, I have nothing to add, thank you.
Yes. Okay.
Sorry, the Dayquil is,
I have a question for staff on the markup that was in our packet to 17,185. This is where we were taking since we were taking the penalty stuff out of 109, you added a paragraph C under the penalties. And my question is, just it says, if the holder of an approved application receives a notice of violation in order to correct or cease an activity, the approved application can be revoked. I'm just grammatically or whatever, should this say permit instead of an approved application? It might be semantics, but how do you revoke an approved application? It seems like everywhere it says approved application, it should say permit instead.
Most of our things are applications, and from the conversation from last Thursday, it sounded like it was supposed to be a across-the-board kind of
Yeah,
thing.
okay,
And technically, you're submitting a short-term rental application.
okay. So in this case, it's just semantics. An approved application equals a permit equals an approved application. Therefore, if either one is revoked or no longer exists, they both don't exist. So the word doesn't matter.
Yep.
Okay,
And we can put permit in there if you want, because I think technically it's like a building permit application. So like, we do use both on some things.
I don't think it matters, just a more question to me. I was like, wait, we have because like I did an application 23 years ago, and I've renewed my permit every single year. It's my permit that's going to get revoked.
We can start calling it a license if you'd rather, so it'd be a
Yeah.
short-term rental license.
I
And then
don't-
your license is revoked.
I don't know if it mattered.
Okay.
It was just, yeah. Okay, that's the only question I had.
But we are okay with that wording, right?
I think if it works for you guys, yeah.
Okay. We just haven't talked about that part yet.
Okay, I'm not revoking anybody's anything or denying their application, so it doesn't really,
Okay, anybody else? Okay, so we are sending this back to the staff with option A. I got that right? A request to improve the fire extinguisher paragraph. If that's the extent of it, I think we ought to be ready to vote on this at our March meeting.
I think it'll depend on the red lines that come back from
Well,
staff
but
and
if
their
the-
departments.
But if the only thing, okay, so I'll ask staff then, do you anticipate changing other parts of option A?
Depends on how conversations with other departments
Okay,
go.
okay.
I heard
Then,
RJ say
okay.
he needs to sit down for
Okay.
90 minutes with his various stakeholders and stuff and get their feedback on it.
Okay, okay.
And he's not prepared to redline right
Right.
now, but
Okay, that's
is
fine.
that fair?
Yeah, I don't expect a blow-up, but I would like to go through scenarios and have a conversation and get a second
Yep.
set of eyes and perspectives. But do I expect to bring this back and have it look like somebody died on it? No,
Yeah.
right? I think we all want to move this forward, and to find a pathway to do that, we're going to find a pathway to do that.
Yeah.
Okay, so my next question is, do we want to have a special meeting?
Yeah, let's get this taken care of.
Okay. Does the staff want to find out when this room is available and just send a note to us?
Yeah, I think we'll do it like we did last time. We'll
Okay.
check availability of staff, of the room, things of that nature.
Okay.
I always feel hasty to try to do it now when I haven't had a chance to speak with people.
Okay, okay. Does anybody have a block of days that you're just simply not available? Anybody going skiing next month?
Yeah, I'm out of town from March 11th through 24th. So
Oh.
I probably can't participate in a special meeting. I'm okay with that.
Okay, does anybody else have a big block of time you're not available?
Yeah, but from the 1st to probably the 14th.
Oh, so we're going to be missing somebody.
Gone the 3rd through the 11th.
So it sounds like we're going to keep our regular meeting.
We could do that as well.
Okay. I don't anticipate having a special meeting as a legislative hearing. So that would mean we would take it up in April. We would finish this in April,
Well, the 25th, right? March 25th.
March 25th, yes.
March 25th.
Yeah. We could do, I mean, this month we had a meeting last week. If there's some time,
Yeah, in the next 2 weeks.
well,
Today's the 25th,
well, if Jeff is gone starting the 1st,
You still have a quorum.
yeah, we'd still have a quorum,
Trust
but
you guys.
when are you gone, Brent?
I'm gone the 12th through the 24th.
Okay, so
So
you're
Jeff,
going to
Jeff
be,
and I overlap,
yeah,
and then Scott's in the middle of that too.
okay, I think we're much better off just meeting at our regular time in March.
Well, while it would be nice to get it done, it would also be nice if we're going to have our public hearing and we're going to finalize it and make our recommendation. It'd be nice if that wasn't a special meeting.
It won't be a special meeting.
Okay, well, sounds like we might do that at our very next meeting. I think we're at that close, right?
Well, no, that's what the staff is saying, that they don't want to take a chance. Well, let's back up a little bit.
We can. If you have faith in us and what we come up with, we can say March 25th is a public hearing. March 25th is already going to be a public hearing, so we can have 2 public hearings.
Well, we can continue the one public
And
hearing.
then you can, well, technically you can continue all of it, but, you know, this one can be continued to April if needed, or we can have all
Yeah.
the stuff ready if you want to make that recommendation.
Okay, I'm hoping that whatever changes the staff makes will be acceptable to the commission, and we'll be able to dispense with this in March. Now, if the staff determines that this is, we're going to have to make major fundamental changes, then you might as well give up on the March meeting. But if it appears likely that we might be able to settle the issue in March, then let's have the legislative public hearing in March.
The only downside to that is if someone who's not actively following this meeting and then hears that we may have a final proposal, a final recommendation to council, and they don't have the ability to view that ahead of time, I don't know if that would rub some folks the
Oh, I
wrong
see.
way.
Okay,
I don't want to rub folks the wrong way, right?
Yeah, no,
Like,
I
I
understand
didn't
what
see
you're
the
saying.
final, I didn't know, I wasn't aware, I couldn't be there. Extended public hearing to special meeting, why can't they just do it right from the get-go? Like, I'm wanting to escape all of that, right? I would love to have a clean proposal for people to view 5 days before a Thursday, or 5 days before a Wednesday meeting, be able to digest it, provide adequate comment, either written or verbally, and go that route.
okay, so that means we would be talking about whatever, you will bring something to us in March, we'll talk about it in March, and then take it up as a legislative public hearing in April.
Let's do that.
Okay, okay. Yeah, that way we could be, I sense that we're going to get through it at our March meeting. At the end of our March meeting, we'll be able to say, this is going to be our recommendation to the city council. And as a consequence of that, we can take up the legislative public hearing in April, and if we do get a lot of comment, then we will change it. And that will give people adequate notice and plenty of time to comment to us. Okay. Any further comments?
Not on that, I have a question for staff a little bit. We've talked a little bit about a recommendation to city council about fees or no fees or all that kind of stuff. I've never been a part of doing something like that, like a recommendation that wasn't an agenda item or redline something. How does that work? Do we need to draft some type of memo or something by ourselves? Is that something that staff would draft for us?
Related to fees?
Yeah,
Yeah, so I don't know if you watched council last night.
not last night.
Well, why not? I did a brief no, it wasn't brief, it was almost an hour, I suppose, on vacant downtown spaces.
Oh, yeah.
Vacant commercial spaces
Yeah.
downtown. And in that presentation, I even said, I feel sheepish suggesting fees, especially these days, because of the implications, the budget issues that we're facing, the staff reductions, which you may or may not have heard today.
Yeah.
Right, it's multi-layered to the point where, council, you do that, and I'll do the code writing, right? Clear, separate duties to the point where I don't even want to suggest it. I'll bring up what Medical Lake did and go that route and see how you feel that way. But super uneasy with even discussing dollar amounts. I'd rather have council come to that conclusion entirely on their own
Okay.
and have us collectively work on the body of the work. Because I feel, and other feelings, that dollar amounts is highly political. And I'd rather not play politics and work on zoning and land use.
Okay. Yep, that's, okay. That makes
Because
sense.
whatever staff, short history,
Yeah.
whatever staff suggests is, well, why that? And why not X? Or why not Y? Why not Spokane? Why not Pasco? Okay, why not? So it's a circular conversation where I just would rather have council determine that independently on their own.
Do you, okay, that's a very good point. I totally understand and respect that. What about us? Do you think we should also avoid even bringing that up? Or do you think it's appropriate for us to say, we had a lot of comment about the fees, here's a recommendation because we had so much public comment? Do you think we should make some kind of statement or recommendation to city council?
Yeah, if you feel like that's in your purview, if you feel that that's in your box of duties, I'm still uneasy about fees,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because
I am
it's
too.
not really what the planning commission's tasked with. You could say, we've received a lot of feedback about the fees and perhaps them being too high and just leave it at that.
Yeah, okay.
Or being now, having the current fees cost prohibitive and leave it at that. And let council make their own conclusions off of those kind of comments.
Or possibly say, you know, we've heard comments from people who talk about the lodging tax that they have generated through their Airbnb, and they think a fee on top of that. We could put something like that, based
Right.
on testimony and comments we've seen, without actually making a,
A dollar amount, a
Dollar,
dollar
yeah.
figure.
okay. But you think we should draft that amongst ourselves, keep staff out of that drafting?
I mean, we can be here.
Yeah, yeah.
Right, but
Right.
like I said, I don't want to suggest a dollar amount.
And what does that look like? Would that be a motion or a resolution, or?
My feeling is, yes, people told us that the fees are burdensome. The problem is, nobody came to us and said, you really need to charge a fee. And yet, there might be thousands of people in Pullman thinking, why are these people getting free permits? I think it's just a matter, the fees are one thing that nobody's going to comment to us unless they're opposed. And that's why I think the city council is going to have to deal with it. I don't think that there's anything we can say that will influence the city council. I'm sure they've heard from people saying the fees are too high. I'm very certain of that. And I don't think they've heard anything different than we have. And even if they haven't heard, they surely know, they're the people who won elections.
Yeah.
And they're the people who are making decisions, not only about fees, but about taxes, about sewer rates, water rates, and all that kind of stuff. They know what happens when they increase those kinds of things.
And they're probably more tuned into lodging tax revenue than I am, right? That was what was informative to me is when people came and said, here's how much my STR has generated in lodging tax revenue that went to the city of Pullman. That was meaningful to me, and I never thought of it in that light.
I
But
actually
maybe
think
city
that-
council already has.
Does that
I
set?
actually think we need a fee. Just, I had to say that because John said nobody says that. I worry honestly about unfunded mandates, and we're giving them, I mean, this obviously is a mandate, and then people in the city are going to have to work on it. And so, I mean, I guess I'm just actually agreeing with John in that this is something for the city council to deal with. I mean,
Yeah.
they're the politicians, they're the ones that get elected based on whether they cut the fees the right way. I mean, I don't think that's really our job,
Okay.
so.
I was just going to make the point that there are probably a lot of groups within the city that have particular businesses, et cetera, that have to pay fees and also generate income. So this could potentially establish a precedent that could be kind of dangerous.
Okay. Okay, so think about fees, and we can talk about it in March if anybody has any proposals. Okay. Anything else on short-term rentals? All righty, we're moving on. Other business. Does the staff have any other business for us?
No.
Okay, does anybody on the commission have any other business?
We talked about bylaw updates, changing our meeting time and the special meetings November, December. Have we thought any more about that?
Next month.
Next month, okay. Awesome.
Any other business? Does anybody in the audience have any other business you want to bring to us? Okay, the next item is forthcoming meetings. We have meetings scheduled for where'd it go? Oh, March 25, April 22nd, and May 27. Does anybody have any conflicts on any of those days? Okay, I don't see any conflicts. Okay, next item is adjournment. Does anybody have any motions?
Second.
We have a motion from Lorena and a second from Scott to adjourn. I detect consensus, so we're adjourned.